tonight's headlines.
A major 7.5 magnitude quake off the coast of Alaska triggered small tsunami waves.
In East Asia.
The World Health Organization lauded Asia's greater success against COVID-19.
And the U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates announced they will mute the microphones of President Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden when they're not answering questions during their final showdown to avoid the interruptions that disrupted their last debate.
And finally, members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ in Hawaii, recently held a drive-through food distribution drive in partnership with the nonprofit Aloha Harvest.
First, a major 7.5 magnitude quake off the coast of Alaska triggered small tsunami waves on Monday, according to U.S. agencies, but there were no immediate reports of casualties or damage. Residents evacuated to higher ground as tsunami warnings covered much of the southern coast of the remote U.S. state, including the thinly populated Alaska Peninsula, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. 2-foot waves were recorded at the tiny nearby city of Sand Point, some 60 miles from the epicenter of the quake, which struck at a depth of 25 miles or 40 kilometers. The at-risk zone extended hundreds of miles northeast to the entry of the Cook Inlet, but it stopped short of the state's largest city of Anchorage, located some 600 miles from the epicenter and at the end of that gulf. And the tsunami warning was downgraded to a less severe advisory, with NOAA stating that affected areas should not expect widespread inundation. The earthquake itself was felt in the nearby Alaska Peninsula community of King Cove, but everything seemed to be intact, according to City Administrator Gary Henai. And he told this to the Anchorage Daily News. Alaska is part of the seismically active Pacific Ring of Fire. The U.S. state was hit by a 9.2 magnitude earthquake in March of 1964, the strongest ever recorded in North America.
Meanwhile, State Weather Bureau Pagasa said Tropical Storm Pepito, with international name Saudel, has slightly intensified as it made its first landfall in the country over Aurora. As of 7 a.m., Pepito was 375 kilometers east of Infanta, Quezon, or 385 kilometers east of Baler, Aurora, and has maximum sustained winds of 55 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 70. It now has a maximum sustained winds of 75 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 90 kilometers per hour. Signal number 2 is now up in La Union, Pangasinan, Ifugao, Benguet, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, Nueva Ecija, Tarlac, Aurora, the southern portion of Isabela, the southern portion of Ilocos Sur, and the northern portion of Zambales. Signal number 1 is now up in Abra, Kalinga, Mountain Province, Bulacan, Pampanga, Bataan, Metro Manila, Rizal, the rest of northern portion of Quezon, including Infanta and Real, and the rest of Zambales.
To Thailand now, where the Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha gave a patriotic speech at a post-cabinet meeting, claiming that his duty is to eradicate all the ill intentions towards the kingdom. Let's listen in.
ฟังเพลงแล้วรู้สึกอะไรขึ้นมาบ้างไหมนะเราลูกหลานไทยคนไทยอยู่อย่างจงรักตายอย่างภักดีหน้าที่ของคนไทยทุกคนหน้าที่ของรัฐบาลหน้าที่ของผมแล้วก็พวกเราทุกคนก็คือเราต้องช่วยกันป้องกันกำจัดการกระทำที่มีเจตนาร้ายกับประเทศความพยายามที่จะยุยงปลุกปั่นสร้างความวุ่นวายความแตกแยกสับสนมาภายในประเทศนั่นคือสิ่งที่เราต้องไม่ยอมรับให้เกิดขึ้นคำนึงถึงสิทธิและเสรีภาพของสื่อมวลชนเป็นสำคัญนะครับยกเว้นในบางกรณีที่เผยแพร่ข้อมูลเท็จบิดเบือนนะยุยงปลุกปั่นมาตลอดเวลา
Thousands of Thais defied a fresh government warning on Monday and again took to the streets as the embattled premier recalled parliament to thrash out how to end weeks of protests. The protesters rallied in 3 locations in the capital, singing the national anthem and raising a 3-finger salute borrowed from the Hunger Games movies that has come to symbolize opposition to the military-backed government. Some even carried signs reading slogans such as 2020 is a bad year, but Thai politics is worse. Earlier on Monday, embattled Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha also said Parliament, currently in recess, would be recalled to discuss how to reduce tensions, and he also warned protesters not to break the law.
Back in the Philippines, the city government of Manila has adopted shorter curfew hours, which will start on Wednesday, moving the curfew from midnight to 4 a.m. Manila Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso, in an announcement made over Facebook Live, said he already signed Ordinance number 8692 that will take effect on Wednesday, adding that from December 1 onwards, curfew hours will become even more shorter from midnight until 3 a.m. Domagoso said the decision was based on their meeting with the Metro Manila mayors to further accommodate more businesses, help them survive the COVID-19 pandemic, and assist employees return to their work. With the new curfew hours, Domagoso called on all barangay officials as well as heads of the Manila Police District to strictly implement the same. Meanwhile, Domagoso clarified that the curfew for minor children are still subjected to Ordinance number 8547, which establishes protection and discipline hours from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. He said for the minors, their parents will be held liable if their minor children are caught on the streets during their curfew hours.
A number of European countries took urgent new measures to combat a second wave of coronavirus infections, as the World Health Organization blamed the surge in worldwide cases, now more than 40 million, on countries' failure to quarantine infected people properly. Ireland and Wales became the first countries on the continent to re-enter lockdown as the number of people who have died from COVID-19 in Europe passed 250,000.
The government has decided that the evidence of a potentially grave situation arising in the weeks ahead is now too strong. Therefore, for a period of 6 weeks from midnight on Wednesday night, the entire country will move to level 5 of the framework for living with COVID-19. It is the view of government, supported by the advice of NEFIT, that our schools and childcare services should remain open. This is necessary because we cannot and will not allow our children and young people's futures to be another victim of this disease. That there should be no social or family gatherings in homes or gardens, but visits on compassionate grounds and for caring purposes can continue. We have decided that attendance at weddings will be maintained at 25 guests. Restaurants, cafes and bars will be permitted to provide takeaway services only. Only essential retail may remain open. Everyone in the country has been asked to stay at home, with exercise permitted within a 5-kilometre radius of your home. Only essential workers whose physical presence in the workplace are permitted to travel to work. Those who can work from home must do so.
Meanwhile, India is on course to top the world in coronavirus cases, but from Maharashtra's wearing factories to Kolkata's thronging markets, people are back at work and eager to forget the pandemic.
Keen interest to control the spread of this virus, but I can see people they are not following the guidelines properly.
That now for survival people have to come out and do their jobs, because unless and until you do the business, you don't earn, and if you don't earn, you cannot feed your family. So that is a very precarious question. If you are afraid of the infection, you can't feed your family. So that is a do or die situation.
घर पे मेरे फैमिली मतलब मेरा हस्बैंड वगैरह वो बोल रहे थे कि मत जाओ काम पे, ऐसी सिचुएशन है तो हमको पहले हमारी जान ही सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट है। तो फिर इधर आके देखा तो प्रिकॉशंस लिए थे, इसके लिए मतलब हम घर पे भी नहीं बैठ सकते इतने दिन तक, काम भी ज़रूरी है, हमको पैसा भी ज़रूरी है।
We cannot isolate the economy from the virus or the COVID-19 situation that we are in. We need the economy to grow, at the same time doing and taking the necessary precautions, only we can move forward.
In Argentina, the country surpassed 1 million coronavirus cases, with areas outside the capital, Buenos Aires, bearing the brunt of recent infections. The latest report from the Ministry of Health showed 12,982 new infections in the previous 24 hours, pushing the total to 1,002,649. The number of deaths stood at just over 26,700, while more than 800,000 infected people had already recovered. Argentina, which in March suffered South America's first coronavirus-related fatality, has the 5th largest national case tally, behind the U.S., India, Brazil, and Russia. The majority of new infections are now being detected outside of Buenos Aires and its periphery, which is home to a third of Argentina's 44 million inhabitants.
Dr. Michael Ryan, head of emergencies at the World Health Organization, says Asia's follow-through in the fight against COVID-19 and its population's greater trust in and compliance with their governments have given the continent a leg up against the coronavirus. Let's watch this.
In East Asia and many territories and health authorities, and the health authorities in Japan, in South Korea, the health authorities in the China mainland, in Taiwan, in Singapore, and in Australia have made huge progress against the disease and have managed to really crush that curve and keep it down, and managed to sustain that through a very long time of low numbers. One, I think, was a focus on case detection, case isolation, and especially quarantining of contacts and supporting those contacts in their quarantine, not just sending people home, but supporting them in that process. Well, if you imagine that one person is a case and they have 10 contacts, if I isolate that case and quarantine those contacts, that's 11 people who are affected by the measure, as opposed to a lockdown, which is 400 to 500 people affected by the measure. And the success the countries had in Asia was their ability to find those 11 people, find that case and those contacts. Maybe not all the cases, but enough cases to start breaking the chains of time and to continue doing that. Second thing, obviously, there is an advantage in Asia, and again, I think people in Asia, communities in Asia, do have higher levels of trust and compliance in government, and they've tended to be able to implement for longer some of the measures that have been required of them in terms of their own behaviour. And thirdly, I think, and Maria may comment on this, many of these countries had serious follow-through. Once they got the numbers down, they followed through. They didn't start reducing testing centres, they increased testing centres. They didn't start reducing clinical capacity, they increased clinical capacity. In other words, they ran through the finish line and beyond, and they kept running because they knew the race wasn't over. That finish line was false. Too many countries have put an imaginary finishing line, and when they crossed it, may have decelerated some of their activities. The countries in Asia, South Asia and the Western Pacific that have been successful, to my mind, and have really continued to follow through on those key activities. The other thing many countries have done, I think, is had multiple measures. If you look at testing in places like Korea has been very intense. It's been very intensive, very deep testing at community level. In Japan, it's not been quite as intense, but they've really focused on cluster investigation. They've focused on really breaking clusters and learning from those clusters what's driving super spreading events in Japan. So again, there's no right answer. There's no one size fits all. Each of those successful countries has taken the tools, all of the tools, and seeing how it can apply those tools within its territory, within its social, and then it's followed through on those activities even when the numbers have got low. And it's managed to sustain their community commitment to those measures. But because those countries have been able to open up again, because those measures now only affect small numbers of people, the case and the contacts, and the rest of life has got back to normal, those countries now have an advantage of being able to sustain the effort. It's very tough for countries right now in Europe and North America, going back into another phase of potential lockdowns. People are exhausted, they are tired, and it's not an easy situation that Europe faces or that North America faces. But as Tedros always tells us here, there's always hope. There's always a chance to turn things around.
British researchers said they hope to expose healthy volunteers to the virus that causes COVID-19 in a groundbreaking study to discover the amount needed for people to become infected. The Human Challenge Program, a partnership that includes Imperial College London, hopes the work will ultimately help to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, mitigate its impact, and reduce deaths. In what researchers called a world first, the opening stage of the project will examine the possibility of exposing healthy volunteers to the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, and they will aim to recruit volunteers between the ages of 18 and 30 with no underlying health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, or obesity. In this initial phase, the aim will be to discover the smallest amount of virus it takes to cause a person to develop COVID-19. According to Imperial College in a statement, the volunteer would be infected via the nose, according to Peter Openshaw, professor of experimental medicine at Imperial, and he told this to BBC Radio 4. The study is expected to begin early next year, which also includes the government, a clinical company, and a hospital.
In other news, bottle-fed babies may ingest more than 1 million pieces of microplastics each day. New research showed highlighting the abundance of plastics in our food products. There is growing evidence that humans consume huge numbers of tiny particles formed when larger plastics or larger pieces of plastic break down, but very little is known about the knock-on health consequences. Researchers in Ireland looked at the rate of microplastic release in 10 types of baby bottles or accessories made from polypropylene, the most commonly used plastic for food containers. They followed official guidelines from the World Health Organization on sterilization and formula preparation conditions. Over a 21-day test period, the team found that the bottles released between 1.3 and 16.2 million plastic microparticles per liter. They said the levels could easily be lowered by taking a few additional steps, including rinsing bottles with cold sterilized water and preparing formula milk in a non-plastic container before filling the bottle.
As countries around the world gear up to distribute COVID-19 vaccines, the UN Children's Fund, or UNICEF, has begun laying the groundwork for safe and efficient delivery by buying and pre-positioning key equipment. Let's listen in.
UNICEF is proud to be leading the procurement and supply of future COVID-19 vaccines through the COVAX facility. It's a historic effort involving 170 countries to provide rapid and equitable access to initial vaccine doses when they're available. The scale is massive. We need to secure more than 2 billion doses by 2021.
The agency said it will begin by stockpiling around 520 million syringes in its warehouses to have 1 billion ready for use throughout 2021 to ensure syringes arrive before vaccines are distributed. And this will be on top of the roughly 620 million syringes that it will purchase for other vaccination programs to use next year against diseases such as measles and typhoid.
In New Zealand this time, of a total of 440 Russian and Ukrainian guest fishermen who arrived in New Zealand over the past few days, at least 11 have tested positive for COVID-19. The fishermen from Russia and Ukraine are being quarantined in a hotel in Christchurch, according to the Daily News Herald. They had tested negative before leaving for New Zealand from their countries. The country's health ministry said 14 more cases are under further investigation. New Zealand has recorded only 25 coronavirus deaths in a population of 5 million.
In other news, thousands of indigenous Colombians arrive in the country's capital, demanding a meeting with President Ivan Duque and an end to the growing violence in their territories. Take a look. The demonstrators are also asking that they be consulted on major development projects and for the full implementation of a 2016 peace plan that ended a half a century of insurgency by the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. Protests began on October 10 in southwestern Colombia, and it gradually advanced to the capital. The approximately 7,500 who traveled to Bogota demanded a face-to-face meeting with the president to discuss the rise in violence from guerrillas and other groups financed by drug trafficking.
Meanwhile, police arrest nearly 600 people after demonstrations to mark the anniversary of Chile's social protests turned violent. Rioters torched 2 Catholic churches just days before the country votes in a landmark constitutional referendum. The government of President Sebastián Piñera, one of the protesters' main targets, called on demonstrators to be peaceful and to respect coronavirus restrictions. The deadly outbreak has killed 13,600 Chileans, with more than 490,000 infected. Protests broke out a year ago, initially as a response to a hike in metro fares, before developing into a general demonstration against inequality and the government.
Back here in the Philippines, the National Bureau of Investigation, or NBI, announced the arrest of 2 alleged members of the Abu Sayyaf group in Pasay City. NBI officer in charge, Director Eric Distor, identified the 2 as Jamar Ibi, aka Bas, and Raden Jamil, aka Tamiya, who were arrested on October 12 and 19, respectively, on the strength of a court-issued warrant for kidnapping and serious illegal detention with ransom. Ibi and Jamil were linked in the kidnapping of Jehovah's Witness members in Paticulsulu in 2002. Distor said the operation arose following information received by the NBI Counter-Terrorism Division that certain Abu Sayyaf members who served as perimeter guards at the time of the kidnapping were seen in Pasay City. The 2 were positively identified by the witness from a photo lineup. The NBI CTD agents, together with Armed Forces of the Philippines counterparts, conducted a series of casing and surveillance operations on October 12, leading to the arrest of Ibi. Acting on the same intelligence report, the NBI CTD operatives, together with the AFP counterparts, launched another operation that led to the apprehension of Tamiya on October 19. Both are now detained at the NBI detention facility.
Meanwhile, Australia will take part in a large-scale military drill off the coast of India next month that will bring together a quartet of countries concerned by rising Chinese influence. India, Japan, and the United States. And for the first time since 2007, Australia will take part in this November's Malabar naval exercise, a move that will likely spark Chinese protest. Australian Defence Minister Linda Reynolds said that the exercise was about demonstrating their collective resolve to to support an open and prosperous Indo-Pacific, a well-used allusion to countering China's authoritarian power. India's Ministry of Defense said the naval drill would take place in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, which has been a hotspot for Indo-Chinese strategic competition. Over the last few decades, China has tried to significantly increase influence in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, prompting acute concern in New Delhi.
And we'll take a short break. Eagle News, we'll be right back.
Sa panahon na laganap ang mga sakit, katuwang nyo ang BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Gawa sa state-of-the-art facilities ang BMEG Premium Feeds. Kaya ito ay safe, sanitized, and hygienic. Walang dalang sakit, certified, malinis, sariwa at sigurado. At para malinis ang paligid, gumamit ng Protect Plus Gold. Isang safe broad-spectrum disinfectant na pumapatay ng mga virus, bacteria at fungi. BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
U.S. President Donald Trump called on his supporters to deliver Democrats a thundering defeat at elections on November 3rd during a campaign rally in Tucson, Arizona. The U.S. President also lists French President Emmanuel Macron along with Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un as leaders very much at the top of their game. Let's listen in.
Because we have to be at the top of our game. That's why you can't let Biden be president, because he's not at the top of his game mentally. Can't have that. One thing I can tell you, Putin, President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un, all of them, Macron, they're very much at the top of their game. You can't let this happen to our country. With the pandemic, they're getting tired of the pandemic, aren't they? Getting tired of the pandemic. You turn on CNN, that's all they cover. COVID, pandemic, COVID. You know why? They're trying to talk everybody out of voting. People aren't buying at CNN, you dumb bastards. They're not buying it. That's all they talk about. No, it's great. It's great. But I took it and it was incredible. And I was out, I took it, I felt like Superman. The next morning I woke up, I said, let me at him. This is the most important election in the history of our country. This is an election that's a choice between a Trump recovery at the highest end or a Biden depression. And Dr. Fauci said, don't put on masks. You see the thing. And now he says, put on masks. And they say, you know, he's a wonderful guy. And he is a wonderful guy. I like him. He just happens to have a very bad arm. He has a bad arm, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy. A lot of our people don't like him. I like him. You have to understand him. He's a promoter. What can I tell you?
Now, President Trump's remarks came a week after Dr. Fauci expressed displeasure at the use of a clip of him in a Trump campaign video about the coronavirus. President Trump's remarks came a week after Dr. Fauci expressed displeasure at the use of a clip of him in a Trump campaign video about the coronavirus. Dr. Fauci said, in my nearly 5 decades of public service, I have never publicly endorsed any political candidate. The immunologist hit back, saying his statements in the video were taken out of context. At various points during the pandemic response, Dr. Fauci has clarified or corrected President Trump's public comments on the development of COVID-19 treatments and vaccines.
Still on the U.S. presidential campaign, nationwide Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden leads President Trump by 8.9 percentage points, and that is according to a Real Clear Politics average of polls, and the Democrat has more modest leads in several battleground states. Biden dispatched his running mate Kamala Harris to Florida to rally voters there. Let's listen in.
March, and we will organize. There is so much on the ballot in 2020. Justice is on the ballot in 2020. Economic justice is on the ballot in 2020. Climate justice is on the ballot in 2020. Healthcare justice is on the ballot in 2020. Reproductive justice is on the ballot in 2020. Criminal justice reform is on the ballot in 2020. Climate reform is on the ballot in 2020. Everything is on the ballot in 2020. Joe Biden is on the ballot in 2020. These days lost because of this virus that this man had an opportunity to deal with, but denied fact, denied science, and lied to the American people. So we know we need a change, and a change is coming. Donald Trump has this weird obsession with trying to get rid of whatever Barack Obama and Joe Biden created. Have you noticed that? It's this weird obsession, right? Local.
And the battle over ballots also continues. In San Francisco, voters cast their ballots in early voting with just 15 days to go before November 3 elections. A big tent has been set up outside the City Hall because of virus concerns to allow better air circulation and space for social distancing. Let's listen in.
And I think the earlier the ballots are counted, the better off we're going to be. Because if everybody waits until November 3rd, it's going to be January until we know the outcome of the presidential election. And I think that's too long to wait.
So basically, Trump is just really horrible, and we all hate him, and we need him to be out of office. So this year, more than any other year, it's so important to vote and make sure that you get your ballot in time so that we can have the people in that we want.
My vote I get my bill and the ballot in the mail, and something because what the organization is saying now, it's more important to vote in person to make sure it gets counted. And I don't trust the mail right now because of what's going on with our president.
So the turnout in San Francisco has been really good so far. We've got about 24% turnout for this election, which is probably one of the higher turnouts I've seen since I've been here in 20 years.
Record numbers of Americans have already cast ballots in person or by mail. 30 million, according to one tracker, ahead of the November 3 election as the rivals race from one swing state to another to marshal support.
Weeks before the U.S. presidential election 2020, our EBC correspondent in New Jersey, El Aguilar, was able to get some reactions from the voters there. Let's find out what concerns them the most and why. El.
Yes, I did vote in 2020, and my vote was for Biden and Kamala Harris. The reasoning for this vote was because there's a lot of things that concern me about both parties, but I'm lesser concerned with Biden's party, so that is the reason I voted. Let's go Biden.
Are you voting?
Yes, I definitely will be voting.
Why? What concerns you?
As a mother with a 5-year-old African-American son, I feel it's very important, especially in this time and age, to really start to change the dynamics and really honestly define the true meaning of equality at this point. It has to be done. It's very crucial. It has to be done. Even if it's not Trump in the White House, you eventually have to pick your poison, but you want to pick your poison in your components on who is going to protect the world as a whole, not just a gender or a race. And I feel that at this point in time in our lives, we really have to make a change and a stand.
I have been a voter since I was 18 years old. That was one of the first civic duties that I participated in and I was proud to participate in. Even though as a young kid my grandmother would bring me into the polling booth with her, I always had it in my heart that when I turned 18 that I wanted to register to vote and to vote. It's my civic duty. I've been voting ever since I was 18 and I'm going to continue to participate in the electoral process because I think that's important for our democracy and our communities to represent and select leadership that benefits our community.
Thank you, El Aguilar from our New Jersey Bureau. The U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates announced that they will mute the microphones of President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden when they're not answering questions during their final showdown to avoid the interruptions that disrupted their last debate. Let's listen in.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why would you answer that
because
question?
the question is
radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?
Right.
Gentlemen, I think
this
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to.
Now, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes to answer the moderator's questions, during which time the other man's mic will be shut off. And once they both have had their 2 minutes, there will be open discussion and neither mic will be muted. In the last debate in September, the news site Axios reported that President Trump interrupted Biden 71 times compared to the former vice president's interrupting President Trump 22 times.
Finally, in other news, 6 Russian military intelligence officers have been charged in the United States with carrying out cyber attacks on Ukraine's power grid, the 2017 French elections, and the 2018 Winter Olympic Games. That, according to the Justice Department. Let's watch this.
Today, we announced criminal charges against the conspiracy of Russian military intelligence officers who stand accused of conducting the most disruptive and destructive series of computer attacks ever attributed to a single group. But as this case shows, no country has weaponized its cyber capabilities as maliciously and irresponsibly as Russia, wantonly causing unprecedented collateral damage to pursue small tactical advantages and fits of spite.
While the alleged perpetrators of these crimes were Russian government officials, the victims who suffered real harm as a result of these crimes were often ordinary citizens and businesses around the world. These are citizens and businesses that rely on such things as electricity for warmth during a cold Ukrainian winter, a reliable banking system as a foundation for a stable economy, untainted elections free from interference by foreign adversaries.
The 6 GRU agents were also accused of staging a malware attack called NotPetya that infected computers of businesses worldwide, causing nearly $1 billion in losses to 3 U.S. companies alone. In addition, they allegedly targeted international investigations into the nerve agent poisoning of Russian former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter, and waged cyber attacks on media outlets and parliament in Georgia. Russian officials dismissed these developments. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the charges against 6 Russian intelligence officers as rampant Russophobia. We still have more updates for you. Please don't go away.
Skyway Stages 1 and 2, the elevated toll road system project, run from a section of the South Luzon Expressway from Alabang to Magallanes, Makati. The Skyway Stage 3 is an elevated expressway connecting the South Luzon Expressway through the existing Skyway Stages 1 and 2 to the North Luzon Expressway via Balintawak. Skyway Stage 4 is an 80-kilometer mixed elevated and at-grade toll road that will connect the existing Skyway system, starting from the FTI section all the way to Bulacan.
In the Philippines, same terms will be applied for small-scale business owners that would like to borrow from the COVID-19 assistance to restart enterprises or CARES Fund for the 13th-month pay of their employees, according to Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez. Now, this is after Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III bared that the Department of Trade and Industry committed some 4 billion pesos that can be tapped by micro and small enterprises or MSMEs as loan to pay for their workers' 13th month benefit. Lopez told reporters in a text message that the 4 billion pesos will come from the CARES program funded by Bayanihan 2 Act. Under the Bayanihan 2, the government allotted 10 billion pesos to DTI's financing arm, Small Business Corp, to fund its loan program for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Of the total fund, 6 billion pesos was allotted for MSMEs or MSMEs in the tourism sector.
In other news, Kyodo News reports that Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has arrived in Indonesia. In talks with President Joko Widodo, he said he plans to offer financial aid to Indonesia, one of the countries or Asian countries hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic. According to the sources, Japan is prepared to extend low-interest loans worth several tens of billions of yen to Indonesia. The country has seen more than 360,000 confirmed coronavirus infections and more than 12,000 related deaths. Suga and Jokowi are expected to discuss restarting travel between their nations, virtually suspended due to the coronavirus crisis. They will also talk about cooperation in the development of infrastructure, such as railways and ports. The meeting at the Presidential Palace in Bogor, south of Jakarta, comes as Suga, on his first foreign trip since taking office on September 16, seeks to strengthen ties with Southeast Asian countries to counter China's growing influence. Indonesia's exclusive economic zone overlaps with China's 9-dash line, which marks the world's second-largest economy's expansive claims in the South China Sea, while Vietnam is one of the claimants in the territorial disputes in the sea area.
And London's Heathrow Airport began to roll out paid-for rapid coronavirus testing with results in 1 hour as it seeks to boost demand decimated by the deadly pandemic. The LAMP saliva test, which doesn't have to be processed in a laboratory, will cost 80 pounds or $102 per passenger and is available initially for passengers flying to Italy and Hong Kong from Terminals 2 and 5. The COVID-19 test will provide results more quickly than those used by Britain's state-run National Health Service, according to the Heathrow test providers, aviation services company Collinson and logistics firm Swissport. Passengers will be asked to register online for the test before traveling to Heathrow, which is based west of the British capital. Collinson and Swissport described the test as a as a critical step in the aviation sector's recovery, restoring traveler confidence and reopening routes from the UK to the rest of the world.
A problem that halted trading on the Paris stock market and others across Europe was a middleware issue and not a cyber attack, that according to the operator Euronext. Trading ground to a halt for around 3 hours early Monday in Amsterdam, Brussels, Dublin, Lisbon, and Paris, and the French market closed late before issuing a statement that most trades made after 5:30 local time would be annulled. A Euronext spokesman insisted it was a technical problem that has been resolved at the middleware level, one of the systems that ensures the persistence of data. Trading proceeded without incident in the first half of the session this Tuesday.
Members of the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ in Hawaii, recently held a drive-through food distribution drive-in partnership with the nonprofit Aloha Harvest. Two of the state's well-known people observed the event and urged other groups to also help those in need. Alpha Dacenas from our Hawaii Bureau was there and files this report.
I am impressed by how efficient this operation is. There are so many helping hands. What I really like about this is the fact that the Church of Christ, Iglesia ni Cristo, has taken what we know is an issue and a problem into their own hands and partnered with a very good organization like Aloha Harvest. And from what I gathered, you've also tried to get more resources from your own members. This is a testament where sometimes we cannot wait for government.
State Senator Misa Lucha and local celebrity Augie T share their impressions on a recent Aid to Humanity drive-through food distribution sponsored by members of the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ in Hawaii.
You know, during COVID-19, we've seen the good side and the bad side in people, and this is one of those good sides that not only do good things for our community, but really, the heart of Christian is to serve and give back. These people here at the church is doing exactly that, which is what we want to do. In order to bring back confidence in the community, we need to honestly serve and be empathetic to our community. So this is awesome.
We know we see a problem. You guys rolled up your sleeves and took the ball and ran with it. And I'm trying to solve an issue in our community, which is, of course, the fact that a lot of our people are unemployed. So neighbors helping neighbors. It is a great demonstration of your charity, of what your core values are. Initiatives like this really alleviate the pain and suffering of our unemployed. So whether we're opening tomorrow or whether in 2 weeks, I think it's beside the point because in the interim, our people need help. And organizations like Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo really should be commended for having you folks do your part, doing your fair share of helping the needy, helping our economically disadvantaged families.
They also believe that relief projects like these offer much needed boost and motivation to residents as the Aloha State slowly reopens its economy.
We used to have the lowest unemployment rate in the country, and now we have one of the highest with almost 30%. So that is really a sad state of event, right? And of course, a lot of it is because of the fact that we have tourism as our economic driver, and tourism has dried up.
I mean, now is a time, right? We sing a great reset. A lot of people, especially in our community here in Ewa, Waipahu, and Minilani, we have the largest unemployment. That means a lot of people are either making ends meet or really having a hard time putting food on the table. So if you have the ability to do this and give back to your community, what a way to show a serving heart and be Christ-like, yeah?
Both Misa Lucha and Augie T even offered some words of encouragement to other groups and communities that may have the capacity to help others in need and to emulate the global church's recent efforts.
I would like to encourage them or challenge them even to be able to step up, just like how Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo did, to be able to bring their resources together, get people who are of like minds, reach out to potential community partners so that you can solve an issue that is before us. We have a lot of economically affected families who are impacted by COVID. And I hope that you will find it in your hearts to give, find it in your hearts to be able to share whatever resources that we have. You know, when you look at our community suffering, you cannot help but step up. So hopefully, for those of us who are out there listening, let's do our fair share to support our community, to be able to alleviate the pain and suffering that our families are going through.
This drive-through is just one of several events already scheduled for this month of October alone by the members of the INC here in Hawaii. Reporting from Eva Beach, I'm Alfred Acenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you.
Thank you, Alfred.
Don't you just love it when the community comes together and when
Yes.
the church takes part in that? We all need that right now.
That's true.
Kind of light news that we all need to see tonight. Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm CJ Hero. We'll be back here tomorrow.
And before we go, I'd like to greet our playback girl. Playback girl. Isa, very happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And the son of our prompter girl, Gab Gab, a very happy birthday as well. Happy birthday, guys. Okay, and may you have many more. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by Be Big Premium and Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan. SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.